Hello, everyone. This is Neil Foote, and I'll be hosting our DBFF Soul Talk this afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We've got a great conversation. This afternoon, we will be talking to Frederick W. Gooding Jr., aka Dr. G, and we are going to go deep into the conversation that we've all been having for so many years about Blacks and the Oscars. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. G, and then we will get going with the conversation, okay? Dr. G is a professor over at Texas Christian University here in Fort Worth, Texas. He is the Dr. Ronald E. Moore Professorship in Humanities in the John V. Roach Honors College. He critically and analyzes race within mainstream media. He contextualizes the problematic patterns based upon their historic roots. He's best known for his work, You Mean There's Race in My Movie? The Complete Guide to Understanding Race in Mainstream Hollywood. This is a book used by high schools and universities all around the country. He's also co-editor of Stories from the Front Room, How Higher Education Faculty Overcome Challenges and Thrive in the Academy. His 2018 book, America Dream Deferred, focuses on the practical applications of equity, carefully detailing the growth and struggles of Black federal workers in the post-war era. And his latest work, which we'll spend a great deal of time talking about, is called Black Oscar. He expands his reach into cultural studies by analyzing African American Academy Award winners and how their narratives reflect and reinforce larger American history. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. G to DBFF Soul Talk.
Thank you for the introduction, Neil. It was quite gracious and generous. In addition to all those things, I am also not having the best of hair days. However, this is show business, so we must roll on. It is what it is. But I'm very appreciative of Harry and Linda Eady for not only starting the Denton Black Film Festival, but also for the invitation to have the opportunity to talk about this topic, which is quite relevant and important.
Oh, absolutely. We've got the Oscars coming up in a week from now. And Dr. G, you spent a lot of time kind of diving into this issue. We're going to get into your book, but tell folks a little bit about, who you are, where you're from, and what movies influenced you growing up.
Absolutely. So I am from the city of brotherly love, and I realize that not everybody has the privilege of saying that. So I feel quite privileged indeed. And that, of course, is the city of Philadelphia. And for anyone who ever thought anything positive about the Constitution, I would like to say you're welcome. As for me, I've had my qualms with the 3/5 of a man clause, but that's just another subject for another time. That being said, in terms of movies that have inspired me, listen, I'm a sucker for show tunes. So when you talk about West Side Story, Sound of Music, even Oklahoma, these are the classics that have provided song to my heart. They allowed me to see the possibility of human connection, and especially when you look at movies like Star Wars. I think when we think about how it's become its own institution many years later. Remember, I was just a mere youth when it was just a one-time movie in the theater, and I can't tell you how it just captured my imagination. I mean, it made the prospect of space travel make it seem that much more approachable and real, if that means anything. I mean, after all, Darth Vader was more real to me than, say, George Washington, right? Even though they might have been equally as pernicious in their own ways.
That's fascinating. Did you have favorite Black actors growing up at all?
Oh boy, now that's a tougher question, and that's part of
Mhm.
the reason why we're here.
Yes.
It was very difficult finding in movies that reflected consistently a positive Black image, right? Because of course
Mhm.
you see Blacks in movies, but the joke around my house was, did you see him, right? Because oftentimes if you went down to pick up your popcorn and your drink, you might miss the brother or sister because
Mhm.
the joke was, why does the Black guy die first?
That's right.
I
That's
don't know
right.
if you've seen that movie before, right? So
Mhm.
it's five people in the horror house. I'm sorry, who's going first, right? Most likely it's the brother. And so for me, very early on, I didn't necessarily have the language for it. I didn't have the verbiage, but I just knew that something was amiss. This idea that, you know, I'm watching all these movies, but something is missing. It's not just seeing my image on screen, but it was not being able to connect that image with my reality, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the coonery and buffoonery I've seen on many a television or movie made by
Mm.
Hollywood,
Yes.
many Black people I know in my life are quite the opposite. You know, I respect a lot of the Black people in my life and the good things that they've done. And for some reason, I just wasn't seeing that same type of character development on screen. Maybe the first person to really open up that doorway for me might have been my fellow Morehouse, Morehouse College alumni, brother Spike Lee,
Mm.
right? But
Yeah.
even still, not all, Spike Lee's a human being. Not all of his products are perfect, and so I think that the paucity and the dearth of images and products actually increases the amount of pressure on a Spike Lee,
Mm-hmm.
or Tyler Perry to be all things for all people. And so while what they do is good, although not everything, again, I've also critiques about Tyler Perry as well, if you're curious. But the idea is that all this pressure we place on them is in part because there's just a lack of numerous images for us to deal with. And so earlier on, it was tough sledding in terms of finding adequate Black images. I mean, arguably even today, it is a challenge.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. For me, and I'll date myself. We were so excited when the TV show Julia came on, right, with Diane
Okay,
Carroll, right, and
okay,
that was just wow, Black woman who's professional,
right,
and she has a kid who's actually, is kind and nice in the family, and which is kind of the evolution of that, into the contrast of the Red Foxes and and Good Times and
right,
on and on from different strokes and these kind of really
yeah,
bizarre combinations of individuals that
yeah,
I think were juxtaposition if you were Black and middle class in America during any period. I grew up during the 60s and
right,
70s and 80s. I mean, we were surrounded by certainly families who did not look like any of that or act like any of
right,
that in different ways, which is kind of very, that to your point of where do you find those idols, Les. I
yeah,
remember to this day, Dr. G, when a
mm,
couple buddies and I were trying to save some money so that we could go to the movie theater that was like a 20-minute walk so we could catch Shaft.
okay,
'Cause that
gotcha,
was like
right,
it was a
right,
Black movie and we heard
right,
all about it and
right.
we had to go see it. We saved up our pennies and we went to see it and it was like, oh, okay, what's that all about? I
Well,
mean,
I mean,
that's
Neil, to your point, well, I'll tell you what it's about. What it's about is this idea of, isn't this the reason why our white brothers and sisters go to the theater and become inspired and seeing Frozen? Because their image is reflected and
Mhm,
is doing all these super cool, amazing things. And there's inspiration in that. I mean, who wouldn't want that? And so
mhm.
oftentimes when we as African Americans go to the theater, we overlook a couple of matters. I mean, I guess we're just jumping right into it. Number one is
Yeah.
that we often overlook how we are what I call vicarious observers, right? We're not direct participants in the action. So if you think about it, if the protagonist is a white male, and if you're not a white male, you almost from the very beginning have to come up with this contract in your head where you agree just to be as excited as you possibly can watching from the sidelines. But this idea of you taking that full next step and immersing yourself completely in the center of the action, well, it just takes a bit more effort to see that. And look at the flip side, how oftentimes movies that have a majority Black cast, they are known as Black movies, not movies,
Mhm,
but Black
mhm.
movies. And the quote unquote knock against Black movies are that, well, they just simply don't appeal to everybody. Oh, really? They have human beings in them, and they Black movies have movies that contain issues that deal with anybody within human experience. But there's this perception for many whites that, well, because African Americans are the protagonists, maybe it doesn't exactly relate to me, and therefore I have the option of whether I want to see it or not. Growing up, I didn't have the option. If I didn't see Superman in the theater, then I didn't see a movie. Period. I mean, that
Right.
was it. We can talk later about, now we have Netflix and Hulu that provide a few more options and alternates. However, if I didn't decide to see myself as Superman, then I wasn't just going to enjoy the movie. So there's that piece. And
Mhm.
then so the second piece is how we as African Americans are uniquely dependent upon Hollywood to reflect back to us our own image. right? I mean,
Mm.
this is something that's quite unique. If you look at any of our other, brothers and sisters, we oftentimes overlook how there are various, cinemas by which, many people might be able to draw back on, or access to round out their picture. So, in other words, if I'm a Mexican American individual living in the United States, in addition to Hollywood, I also have that which Mexico actually creates. They have their own film
Sure.
industry, their own television productions, whether it be Sábado Gigante or something of that nature, and their own telenovelas. They have their own movies. I mean, similarly, if I'm Chinese American, they literally have their own cinema, right? Or the list goes on. But with African Americans, there's this unique relationship whereby most of our images are not made by us, right? They're sold to us, right? They're manufactured and generated by individuals who don't necessarily have that intimacy. And so it's not to say that there's some sort of law that says you cannot make a movie about someone outside your race. And I thought Color Purple by Steven Spielberg was, approached thoughtfully. I mean, was it a perfect movie? Perhaps not, but I thought it was approached thoughtfully, particularly back in the early 80s, right? 84, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
But then when you look at, say, a movie like The Help by Catherine Stockett, I definitely have some critiques about that. And the fact of the matter is this is, not documentary. If you're telling me, but Dr. G, you've been a little hard on it, I learned a lot from watching it. I say, okay, that's interesting, because that was fiction, right? This is a fictional piece that came from a white woman's mind. And how she got most material is by watching The Help in her brother's house, right? So there's a level of exploitation and appropriation that's going on here. And yet it goes wildfire, New York Times bestseller, is optioned into a book, and it wins an Academy Award. We can talk about that later. But the fact of the matter is that that's great, but I didn't need to go to the movie theater to learn about that aspect of the experience. All I had to do is ask my great aunt Anna, what was it like? Right.
That's right. That's right.
That's all I had to do. So in other words,
Mm-hmm.
we have to be very careful, Neil. I'm not saying that we have to boycott all movies that aren't made by us, but at the same time, I'm at the point in my life, maybe I'm just older and I'm rocking hairstyles that, are like whatever. But I'm just at the point where I'm no longer going to pay for the privilege to poison myself.
Yeah, well, I mean, your book is, your latest book. I think kind of sets the stage for this kind of next part of the conversation we want to dive in. Black Oscars from Mammy to Minnie, what the Academy Awards tell us about African Americans. And I remember when we chatted the other day, you asked a very poignant question. You were like, Neil, do you get it? What I'm saying here, Mammy to Minnie, do you get it? Right?
Yes.
And I share this. And I asked that question, and I want to pause for our listeners to kind of let it think about it from Mammy to Minnie. Now, think about that, right? What's significant about why you chose from Mammy to Minnie, and how does that set up, what we're experiencing now with movies in Hollywood?
Well, Neil, I'm so very glad you asked. So when we look at the subtitle from Mammy to Minnie, I just want to point out that Mammy was the first character by a non-white individual to ever win an Academy Award. And that was Hattie McDaniel for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, 1939. So a couple of details really briefly. Her name in the credit listing was not Haley Jackson. And then we watch the movie and observe that she's a Mammy by trade. No, it's not Haley Jackson, the Mammy. No, her name is Mammy. And so I think from the very beginning, we shouldn't overlook how she's depersonalized, right? Because after all, that was part of the evil genius, if you would, of the era of enslavement, which bled into the era of, shall we say, sustained engagement, through servitude. And this idea that we were the modern day robots, right? I have this little Roomba that goes around and, and hits the corners and backs up and then it goes back to us and dumps it. Well, we were the modern age robots, we were also black as well. And the idea is that, we look like humans, we behave like humans, but we're not human. I mean, we can't sit at the table, but we'll do anything a human will do. Because, if anything, it's so hard out here for me to pursue the American dream. I'm going to have these black people help me out in doing so. So we were the modern age robots. And so the idea that she was depersonalized, I think, is important for us to observe. And Hattie McDaniel maybe rationalized her position by saying, I would rather play a maid on screen for $700 a day than be a maid for $7 a week, right? And so that was like her approach. I'm not. I can't comment on living in that time because I wasn't at that time. But at the same time, we know that she did play a Mammy figure. A Mammy is known as an individual who would just serve as this caretaking function. Okay. That was then. Okay, we get it. Up until World War II, roughly 80% of all Black women served as domestics. That was the only type of job they could get, right? So again, same game, different name, where technically you're free, but you're only free to wait on me hand to foot, right? 24 hours a day. That's the only type of job you can get. Really? Is that a good deal? Okay, so that was the scenario back then. Jim Crow was rampant. Lynchings were happening. I mean, there was a lot of racial terror. If you think about how bizarre a world in which we lived as African Americans, I needed a green book in order to navigate safely so that people wouldn't physically attack me. I mean, if you just think about being African American, just how treacherous proposition it was, right? So Minnie, what does that mean? From Mammy to Minnie. Well, Minnie is the name of an Academy Award-winning role played by Octavia Spencer in 2011 for her role as a maid in The Help, Catherine Stockett, the movie I just referenced. So Neil, I guess my question is, if The Help was made in 2011, right? That arguably is the modern era. Arguably, we have actually saw I think we had a Black president in office during the time that the Help came out, if I recall, right? If I recall. And so I think, for so many people, I mean, we're in this modern era and things are great and we're moving forward, so to speak. But I still have questions about what does that say if Black women are winning Academy Award winning roles, playing subjugated women on screen more than 70 years apart? What does that tell us about the relative progress of Hollywood? Because again, in 2011, my question is, what's so amazing or magical? I mean, again, I'm not trying to be rude, but what's so fascinating about seeing a Black subjugated woman on screen? I'm just so curious about what's so again, this is not a documentary. What am I learning here, right? Because again, I'll get off the Help soapbox just really briefly. I just want to make this point. I don't know about the movie you saw, but the movie I saw, I would make the argument that The Help wasn't even about the help. It was about the white female protagonist, Skeeter, as played by Emma Watson. If you watch her trajectory, right, she graduates, she negotiates with the publisher to get her her column, and then she leverages/uses the advice of Aileen with the advice column, leverages that for a book contract, and then uses the book contract to pursue her dream, which is landing a job in New York. Now, it's great. She connects with this feminist, leading thinker, editor, what have you. And it's great. She actually leaves Mississippi. That's great. She reconciles with her love life along the way. That's great. She reconciles with her mother along the way. That's great. So her trajectory is amazing, right? But when I think about The Help, again, we're depersonalizing once again. Right. Well, it wasn't like Aileen and I forgot Minnie. It wasn't Aileen and Minnie. It wasn't like, right, the name of the movie. Because remember, we do have movies named after individuals, particularly women. The famous would be the Gina Thompson one, and I'm sorry, what's the name of that movie? The Gina Thompson movie with they were like the two rebels back in the day. It'll come to me. Okay, but the bottom line is going back to The Help and looking at the trajectory of the Black woman on screen, they both ended their last scenes on screen in maid outfits. And for me, that's so very telling. Even though they hinted at and suggested that Aileen or Viola Davis's character would pursue a career in writing, I never saw it on screen. Not the way I saw Skeeter's writing career develop and take off on screen, if you know what I'm saying. I saw her just walking off in the distance saying, I might be a writer. And then finally, with Minnie, or Octavia Spencer's character, she, again, was in a maid outfit her last scene on screen. And I guess I'm left with this picture of there's joy in the home because she's smiling, sharing fried chicken cooking duties with her mistress. That's great. But my question is, after that meal, who's going to do the dishes?
Big point. I want to ask a question along those lines. So it may be playing, devil's advocate. Like, what obligation is it for Hollywood to accurately portray how Black folks are? I mean, what is their role in this? I mean, what, because they're shaping the image. What's their responsibility and role? How do you explain that?
Sure. And the name of the movie I couldn't think of, by the way, was Thelma and Louise. Forgive me. You're right. Right. The Gina Davis. Excuse me. So, again, it's possible to make movies named after two women. Okay. It's possible. You're absolutely correct, Neil. There is no obligation by Hollywood to make movies that reflect my image, right? I mean, so that's this weird dynamic. I mean, it's a quote unquote free country. It's and not only a free country, but it's a creative space, right? How can I legislate art? Right? How can I? Right? So I don't want to tell artists what to do and how to do it. No, I can't. But at the same time, you don't have to take my money. And I think we want to observe that there's a relationship here that Hollywood is dependent upon us. I mean, without our patronage, without our financial support, they don't exist, and they're not able to drive the convertibles that they do along, California Interstate Highway 1, right? And so to the extent that, and here's the rub, Neil, right? I just came from taking my class. I'm teaching a new class called The Beauty of Black Music. Okay. And so we're in Fort Worth, Texas. And so due to the largesse and generosity of donors, we were able to take the class from Fort Worth all the way to New York City. And part of during spring break, the class, our business was to literally go to multiple Broadway shows. I know this is terrible. It's hard work. I went to multiple shows. I took them to Harlem. We went to the Cotton Club, saw live performances, live jazz performances, live hip hop performances. And so the idea was to provide all this exposure. This is okay. The point is that in showing the students all of this exposure and whatnot, we often overlook how when we're talking about creating images, who has the ability to create and decide that which will be consumed by the public, right? And when it comes to music, arguably African Americans have had more of an influence in terms of controlling the image that they see. But when it comes to the movies, once again, we have been in the practice of patronizing an institution that simply generates images, and it's a one-way street, sells it to us. And so my point about the New York piece was that in going to these Broadway shows, they weren't cheap. Okay, we needed donors. I'm talking about we spent a good 4 figures just for a group of 10 to go see a show, right? A healthy 4 figures. What's my point? My point is this: if you have to pay to play, then movies become a more readable and accessible form of entertainment. Forgive me for being long-winded, but my point is that if it costs an average family just $800 on tickets to see Hamilton alone, God forbid the kids need something to eat, you have to pay for parking, and we're going to go home with the T-shirt. My point is that who has, and again, maybe you haven't, but I'm a humble professor, and yes, we did go see Hamilton, but I had the plan. It was on the calendar. Every month I was like, okay, well, that's going towards the Hamilton Fund. I mean, so this is not like willy-nilly. So movies become a readily accessible form of entertainment for us. And so my point is this: African Americans are actually overrepresented at the box office. We patronize Hollywood to like nobody's business. And so I think while Hollywood doesn't have to do anything, at the same time, it's in Hollywood's best interest, right? If anything, if they created more products that had more substance and more diversity, they would actually expand their market if they were clever, right? But to the extent that they still depend upon us to faithfully patronize, even through a pandemic, we're the ones holding them afloat. Okay. Remember, Black people always need, we always need the Black vote towards the end. Black people are always necessary until we're not. Okay. And so to the extent Hollywood needs our income, well, then Hollywood needs perhaps to consider our input.
No, excellent point. So we had this huge hashtag Oscars So White movement several years ago. Did that have any impact? Has that changed anything?
Yes and no. Okay, so you're right. 2015, the hashtag Oscars So White campaign was designed to heighten awareness over the fact that out of the 20 acting categories, there's 5 for each category, and there's 4 categories: 1 for Best Actor, one for Best Actress, one for Best Supporting Actor and Actress. Okay, so 20 total nominations. And that year there were none for African Americans, right? And so again, I think what's so very important is to point out how social media has become this new tool. Otherwise, this would have been just like any other year, in the Academy, as far as, oh, well, that's just the way it turned out. But I think the public shaming is what prompted many in the Academy to say, well, we need to respond. And so in 2020, they released new criteria for eligibility for Picture of the Year that take place in the year 2024. So as you see, the wheels of change grind slowly, right? I mean, it was 2015 when it happened, the Flashpoint. 2020, we announced that we're going to change something, and it's not nearly a decade later that we're actually going to institute it. So again, I mean, it's a good thing, right? And I think you should be more mindful. Although I do want to point out, as other critics have pointed out, that say when you look at a movie like Power the Dog, botch the title, the one with Benedict Cumberbatch this year, that has like 12 nominations. It's possible that if you have a white female, you might be able to check all the boxes for diversity and not necessarily have someone like you or me included, right? Even though that's the aim. So there's that detail there, right? And also, I mean, that goes in line with the larger pattern. Like when you look at, say, the first woman to ever win, Academy Award for directing, is Sofia Coppola. Does the name Coppola sound familiar?
Gee, if the family business, is that what you're saying?
Well, it just so happens, right? She's the granddaughter of Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah, that Coppola,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
So, and again, I love the movie that she produced, Lost in Translation. But I thought it was excellent, well done with Bill Murray. But at the same time, opportunity and access, right? If you're the granddaughter of freaking Francis Ford Coppola, then you might have an opportunity that maybe I would not, right? And so nepotism is something that does happen in Hollywood in terms of the sons and daughters. Look at Bryce Howard in Jurassic World. She's the daughter of the young man we saw in Happy Days back in the day. Ron Howard. Or little things such as Catherine Bigelow. She also won Academy Award for Best Picture for Hurt Locker, and she just happens to be the former spouse of the brother who did Avatar. I'm forgetting his name, James Cameron. Right?
Cameron, yeah.
Just so happens. When you look at opportunity access. So when you look at us as African Americans, oftentimes it's a little bit more slow going in terms of generating that social capital in order to be able to make the movies that we're interested in. Let's not forget how famously the Academy Award nominated Malcolm X by Spike Lee. I mean, he's up here hitting the campaign trail trying to raise funds.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and compare that to, some of these, big picture budget movies where, for example, what was I'm absent-minded. That new movie that was made with David Washington and the brother from Twilight or whatever, but it was this big director who was behind it. And my point is, in terms of economy of scale, there's this one scene in the movie. What was the name of the movie? You remember? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll find it briefly. But my point is that just in terms of economy of scale, in this movie, they had a scene where they were supposed to use computer graphics to simulate the crashing of a 747. And so you know what they decided? They decided, it's actually going to be easier for us to crash a real 747, right? So this is the type of economy and scale that we're dealing with. And the movie I was trying to recall is Tenet, right? When you look at that scene. So, I mean, yes, thank you, Ms. Bolden. So that's the type of scale that we're dealing with mainstream movies. But yet when it comes to us, we have chronically suffered from underfunding and, fewer theater releases and smaller promotion budgets. And so it's not to say that there aren't good people making good products out there, but oftentimes they suffer from underexposure and the world would never know. I mean, because the thing about Neil, it's like almost like something's wrong if you didn't go see Avatar. Something's wrong if you didn't go see Frozen. Based upon that marketing campaign, everyone's talking about it. You're like, after all, well, maybe I should go see it just to see what everyone's talking about. And the same doesn't quite happen with many of our movies.
So let's. I want to kind of talk a little bit more generally, and then I do want to talk about this year's Oscars. How significant is it for Tyler Perry or Will Packer or Ryan Coogler, Ava DuVernay, in helping to change the narrative you've been describing about? can they change it? What steps can they do to change it? What's in the pipeline that might tell us that down the road the future is bright? I mean, what you're thinking about that?
My thinking on that is, we simply just need more, because I think we put a little bit too much pressure on the Tyler Perrys, the Ava DuVernays, and the Spike Lees of the world. And we want them to be all things for everything. So, for example, when Tyler Perry first came out, because again, I want to be very clear, I am supportive of the idea of Tyler Perry. This brother went through a lot, and he was able to somehow still stay focused and pursue his dream. And now he's employing people. He has a studio. He has a system in place. I need to applaud this brother for that. I absolutely 100% do. Okay. At the same time, I just want to just state that there are some aspects of the material and the content he produces, of which I have some critiques. I mean, and I really, wonder about the colorism in many of his films. I wonder about the emasculation of Black males in many of his films. I really wonder about that. And so, just because there's a Black producer, writer, director doesn't mean that they're exempt from us, critiquing the ultimate image that we imbibe. And see, and the thing is, that's what hamstrings us, Neil. This idea that, because, I'm all for the cause and, empower and support, right? We don't want to air dirty laundry. I understand that. But there's this idea that because we only have like 3 or 4 that we can name on one hand, like directors, the tendency is, well, don't publicly criticize them, that they're out there just trying to do their thing. I understand that, but if they're also doing things that are kind of similar to what the system is doing, I'm just supposed to take it. I'm supposed to take it. I'm going to be consistent, is what I'm saying. And so, whether you're Black, white, or green behind the camera, if you're producing an image that says, "I don't know if I really love Black people," I'm gonna call that into question. Okay, right? And so that's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm just trying to be consistent as possible. And also the thing is, so many. And again, if you want a specific example, talk to me after class about The Family That Prays. That's a very specific movie, of Tyler Perry movie, by which you had, and I'll just go off just real quick. Because I don't want people thinking I'm just hating just for hate's sake. You know what I'm saying? Valentine just came, and it's all out my system, and I'm just hating. No. The Family That Prays is an excellent example, and I'm not talking about his TV stuff. I'm just talking about Family That Prays as a movie, whereby you had an interracial adulterous affair. So you had a white family, you had a Black family. All I'm saying is, if you haven't seen the movie, just take a look at how the affair was dealt with on both houses, right? From the Black standpoint, from the white standpoint, and there's a difference. There's a difference. And the question, and why? Why is one more violent than the other? Why is one more public than the other? Why is one more private than the other? Right? And oftentimes, and what my argument would be, Neil, is that it's not necessarily Tyler Perry's fault, because who amongst us can jump in the pool and not get wet? I mean, if any one of us was raised in the United States of America, then we've been raised on a mainstream media that has been quite consistent in marginalizing the African-American image. And so to the extent that we've internalized that idea and we manifest it when it's our turn to create, well, I mean, I don't think it takes rocket science to figure out why that would be. I mean, it's deep, and we have to unlearn some of these images and learn how to ask those critical questions, just to make sure that the treatment that we're providing for many of our works are being consistent.
I think you make a fair point. I mean, I think that I think there is a lot of pressure and almost a double standard for the Spike Lees and Ava DuVernays and these folks to kind of say, well, no, you have to get it right. And then when we see examples where they try to get it right, for example, Malcolm X, right? Then it's like, oh my goodness, how can you tell that story? That's airing, as you just said, airing dirty laundry. We can't tell all of the world by showing them behind the curtain, right? I mean, so there's a balance there, but I think I think the idea of how do you give exposure to the folks like that, and which kind of goes to I was just looking at the nominations for the 2022 Oscars that are coming up next week, and 2015 was you reminded me, 2015 was Oscar So White, and then I was looking at the list of actually at least the major categories of actors. 20, right? It's only 20.
Right.
Black actors since 1939, Hattie McDaniel, 2 people Denzel Washington have won twice, and Mahershala Ali has won twice. But
Right.
after that, it's kind of not a lot. And so this year we have, talk about, I guess
Yes.
we got King David and I'm King Richard rather,
King Richard.
and Denzel's also nominated. But talk about this year's landscape
Sure.
of the Oscars and what's
And,
coming.
and I just also want to close the loop on the last question you asked
Yeah,
about
yeah, please.
David Duvernay, and just say that two also examples of where I think there are good positive interventions that are organic would be Issa Rae and the brother whose name escapes me, who is responsible for the reboot of Bel Air. What they both did is they both went to social media first. They went to YouTube. Issa Rae started off with her awkward black girl, got noticed. And again, see, she started off not going through the Hollywood system, but through her own filter, right? It was her own voice. And so when HBO saw that people actually appreciate, who knew, right? There's an audience out here. That's when HBO got on board. And think about how she now was able to enter with significantly more creative control as she tried to go through the studio system, right? So I think that's a positive example as far as her doing her thing, although it's still a long shot. If I put something up on YouTube tonight, am I going to get seen by a major studio? I'm not sure. And also that's what happened to the brother with the Bel Air remix. He put it on. He just made a more gritty, darker turn, a take on the Fresh Prince intros, song. And Will Smith finally heard about it and decided to executive produce the series that's on right now. And a lot of people really like it. A lot of people are hungry for that substance. So I just want to say that. But going to the numbers as far as this year, I think this conversation is timely because hashtag Oscar So White came out in 2015. So, okay, we need to do something. Okay, great. Did you know that in 2020, we only had one Academy Award nomination out of 20? The only one. And it's for Cynthia Erivo and Harriet, right? And for whatever it's worth, again, my power to the sister. And I'm appreciative of her caring about our American sister, Harriet Tubman. But all I'm saying is that she's Black, but not American. Right. She's from the UK. And again, it's no disrespect against Cynthia. I want her to eat and I want her family to eat. But my question, Neil, is, but you mean to tell me that walking the streets of Los Angeles, California, we can't find a sister who's willing to play the role of the distinctly African-American heroine, Harriet Tubman? See, this is my beef is with Hollywood in terms of providing these opportunities for African-American brothers and sisters. That's where my beef is. Because all I'm saying to that point is when they made the movie Churchill, magically, they didn't find a brother from Germany to play the part of Winston Churchill. I mean, it's over in Europe. It's over close. No, magically, they didn't get a brother from the Czech Republic to play the role of Churchill. He looks white. He looks white. What's the problem? No. We need to be received with us, with our experience. All of a sudden, it's different. Same thing with the MLK situation with David Oyelowo. Again, props to him. But all of a sudden, with our situation, it becomes a little more fungible. So it's difficult for us to control. So at any rate, that was 2020. Let's talk about 2020. Right now.
Yeah.
This year we only have 3 nominations out of 20. One goes to Denzel Washington, the most decorated African American that we know. This technically would be his 10th nomination total. 9 for acting, and 1 is for executive producing the film in which he was nominated in, and that is Macbeth. So a couple of details. This is not a new risk, right? This is not new talent that you're investing into and developing and growing. No, this is Denzel. I mean, we only need to say his first name, right? And we know who we're talking about, okay? And you're talking about it's not a risk because it's based upon a movie that Macbeth is based upon a story that's, I don't know, like 400 years old. And for those of us keeping score at home, it was on a movie released through Apple Plus, right? I mean, and again, I'm not disrespecting, but it was not as if like all 3,000, 4,000 theaters across the nation, So in other words, it was a different distribution channel. So technically, they've changed the rules now to where it's eligible, but not the way Top Gun hit the theaters when you were in high school. You understand what I'm saying? So it's just a little different. And then the other 2 nominations come from the movie King Richard you mentioned.
Right.
And what's the issue there? The issue there is that this also speaks to my beef with Hollywood about having what I call a limited imagination. And what's my point? Meaning that the only time that you see African Americans prominently featured in movies as the protagonist is when they're the subjects of what I call para-realistic films. Think about Ray. Think about Dreamgirls. Think about Ali. These are all Academy Award nominating films that are based upon the extraordinary lives of African Americans. Okay. Meanwhile, see, and the rub for me is, let's contrast this with many of the other movies that are completely made up. Like again, this movie Power the Dog is a completely made up movie with 12 nominations, but it still captures our imagination. It's well done. Look at the costumes. But when it comes to us, it reflects this limited imagination of Hollywood. Like the only time I'm willing to invest is if it's based upon this surefire bet. Like we all already heard of the Serena sister, the Williams sisters.
Right.
So they've hedged their bets in many ways. And you're utilizing Will Smith, of which people have heard of before. Right. And, think about, and again, God bless Will Smith, but in many ways, I'm wondering to what degree this is going to be, part 2 of the movie we saw with his son, right? In terms of, just in terms of a haggard black male, trying to make it. Now, again, I don't think Richard in general gets enough credit for the vision that he had, and the persistence and the tenacity he had to deal with a hostile environment. Okay. And then Wells was just like a mere part of that whole puzzle. You can imagine all the microaggressions he had to deal with, just registration showing up and parking and, just everything he had to deal with. But my point is that most of the Academy Award nominations that are black, they follow this pattern, right, of what I call gravity of reality, meaning that over 80% of all the Academy Award nominations I've analyzed, 86 total, right, up for the 94 years. You're talking about 80% of all black Academy Award nominations. They deal with issues of either poverty and racism, or racism and poverty, or poverty and racism. Right. See, again, that's what I call limited imagination. We're what I call grounded by what I call the gravity of reality. Meanwhile, my white brothers and sisters are liberated by what I call the freedom of fantasy. So, Neil, in closing, my point is this: that even though nowadays I can technically go anywhere I want, technically live anywhere I want, if I have the income to buy in that neighborhood, I can technically eat at any restaurant I want, right? Technically. What I still would like to suggest to our audience is to think about the ways in which we might be segregated, not physically, but psychologically. To what degree do we still in our minds still not view Black people as worthy of the full reign of humanity, dignity, and respect? If and when I see a Black person, I know it's going to be within this subjugated context. They're not free to explore through space or take a remote control and pause time and manipulate the world with godly powers for their own personal gain, like Bruce Almighty, right? Remember, Morgan Freeman was God only to what? Bruce, I give my powers to you. So that's when he's God. He's God, so I can give it to you, so you can sort out your own personal life, right? So that's when I'm God. So my point is that, y'all, again, we have to start somewhere. And so, I enjoy the movies. That's why I watch them. But at the same time, party people, I just want us to remain critical and keep watching what we're watching.
So I guess I'm missing something, Dr. G, because didn't you just say we over-index in going to movies than most other racial groups? And that's across the board. That's not just for quote unquote Black movies. That's just going to see movies, correct?
That's what you're saying, right? Even though we're 13% of the population, we're up to 30% of the market in various where we're located.
So if the power of the dollar is green, why aren't we having more influence on this imagination of that potential for of opening the world, not just Black people's world, but the entire world, to wonderful stories that could be about Black people, could be about anything. So what am I missing? What's the glass ceiling that we gotta bust again to get to that point where we're not even, we're having a different kind of conversation of the choices. And I suppose, again, our parents and folks might say, well, look, you got more choices than I ever had. I had Amos and Andy. Right? I mean, that's all I had. And I had, a couple folks with tap dance on Ed Sullivan. That's all I had. So what are you kids you're complaining about?
But see, Neil, I really want to push back against that, because as I was saying earlier, dearth develops desperation. Just because there's been a lack of Black images, that doesn't mean that I have to accept the one image that you trot along. Because see, Neil, here's my thing. What I attempted to do through this book was provide quantitative analysis. So that way it's not just a matter of, oh, he feels that way. No, here's the data that demonstrates that Blacks have chronically been absent from the picture, right?
Yeah.
It's something different. But also what I wanted to do was, in addition to the quantity, so we oftentimes will say, going back to our early example, we talked about Star Wars, that was inspirational for me.
Yes.
It did not escape my attention that there was only one Black male in space, right? And that was Lando Calrissian, right? You know what I'm saying? You know, works every time, right? Works every time, right? So, I mean, that was it. That was it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that was it.
Yeah.
We Lando, that was it. But, you know, I mean, we held on to Lando for dear life. I mean, you know, that was the most surprise. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, we got the fisticuffs. Because I remember with the cape, he had the brown cape and everything. It was like, what did you do to Lando's cape? I mean, this is it, right? But at the same time, this idea that, okay, you know, I don't know if, I mean, I don't want to be, you know, crass or indignant, but someone should look up the title, the Judge Judy. I mean, you've seen her on TV. You should look up the title of her book. You know, I didn't say it. You should look up the title of the book. Something about don't tell me that it's raining or something of that nature. So this idea of like, hey, I think to the extent that we know more about the patterns, to the extent that we are more confident in going to a Denton Black Film Festival and seeing the high quality that's out there, then perhaps we are more emboldened to say, I'm not going to jump at the first thing that just comes across my plate. Just because there's a Black face doesn't mean that it's a high quality face that I want to enjoy, right? Right. So I mean, think about you driving along the highway. Oh, McDonald's comes up. Like, you know, maybe I'm gonna hold out for something a little bit more substantive, right? Because McDonald's is technically food. But we all know that the quality of the food is just not that good. It's not going to sustain you. It's not going to nourish you. I mean, in fact, I mean, you all saw the documentary Supersize, that if you eat it repeatedly, you know, it's actually going to damage you. It's actually going to have a detrimental effect. And that's what I would want us to be more conscious about, as far as, you know, for our own souls, our own intellect, our own emotions. Can we be a bit more? Can we be a bit more discriminatory about the type of material that we bring into our systems, right? Just because it's Black doesn't mean that's good. It could be whack. It could be whack and Black. I mean, for all I know, and we shouldn't be afraid to put on that critical lens and be judicious. I mean, we should pick our movies the way we pick our fruit, right? Like no, seriously, I'm going to imbibe this. Like what's going on here? Let me look at it from all angles and understand. Okay, and guess what? And sometimes you'll get the apple or the avocado that's bruised, and then you excise and you cut out the part that's so again. It's not again. I'm not in the movies like this, Neil. No, I mean the thing is,
I hope not. Yeah, it's just too expensive to go to the movies and be like that.
Can't last on that, right? So if anything, I'm able to say, okay, that part. We need to take that. I disagree with that part. Oh, this part I liked, right? So if anything, the analysis liberates me to actually take the parts that I do, you know, think are worthy, right? Because again, many of these movies are excellent. You know, they do inspire as they should, but not all of it all the time. And it shouldn't be either or, where I must like the movie. For example, like Black Panther, I'm perfectly fine and comfortable in my skin saying I liked parts of Black Panther. I mean, no. I'm not going to sign off 100%. I have some critiques, and I can tell you later. I mean, of course, but the thing is, of course, I support it. I'm the one who rented out the movie theater and took, over 150 people from my school, with my money to see it when it came out. So I support it. But at the same time, I'm just trying to be consistent about, so that way for whoever's listening, they can at least be aware of how we can improve and influence the future.
I think that's a powerful statement. I mean, when you think about streaming, I mean, we've got all these new platforms now that again have disrupted Hollywood. Hollywood screamed a little bit, but now they kind of realize that it's competitive. Does that open doors for possibilities for Black filmmakers or for filmmakers, period, to try to change this narrative?
100%. In that it changes, and I think time will tell to what degree, because there's still this pecking order, if you would. Movies released through Netflix and Hulu have just a different risk assessment level to them. I mean, think about how there's actually a bit more leeway within the Hulu space or Netflix space, because if you have, like say a series, you have more opportunities. You have more bites at the apple with which to experiment or try, and develop, certain characters over time. And so I'm for it. And so I don't think there's any secret why we may see more diversity through those outlets. For me, I'm still remain focused on the big time tentpole mainstream movies made by the Hollywood studio system. Because see there, Neil, the stakes are different. I have 90 minutes. That's it. I have 90 minutes. There is no tune in next episode. There's no tune in next season. Oh, season 2 is better. No. This is it. And if I get it straight, I get it straight. And if not, then my 150 million, that's the average cost to make a mainstream movie, by the way, is down the tubes. I need to make this money and then some, right? I need to make this money and then some. So things have to be perfect. So it's so funny, Neil, it's so ironic. Funny isn't ironic, is that oftentimes the bigger the production, the more conservative the thinking. Oh, wow. See, that's the thing we don't think about. So when you think about like some of these, why do you think the superhero movies are so prominent, Neil? It's because they're surefire bets. They're established off of built-in audiences. You're talking about audiences that have been established since wartime.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about decades of fans, who have this emotional connection. So, I mean, whether the movie's good or not, when they just make a new Spider-Man, they already know that they're going to make a certain amount, and then it's just a matter of whether we're able to hit these other marks. But it's not like a risk in that truest sense, right? And that's where many African Americans are left out in terms of our images, in terms of how to be able to crack that space, right? So again, the closest thing we have right now is maybe Black Panther, in terms of franchise. But again, if you're looking at the details, that was only the 11th movie in the Marvel comic universe, right? That was the 11th one. They've already established over a decade that they're making these movies now. And then you're going to do the shout out the Black, and it was almost as if at that point in time, I wonder, I mean, some people I'm sure enjoyed the movie, but I wonder with some of my white brothers and sisters, whether it was like, well, if I don't go see this movie, I'm going to be racist, and maybe in a good way, they felt that pressure finally to support, something as African American, but still, and again, maybe we'll have a conversation about this later. I enjoyed the movie Black Panther, but I don't know if watching the movie, I saw Black Power. Something different. And then the only thing I'll say about this is this real quick, is that, Neil, I mean, you saw the movie or no?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just curious, real quick. In most of the scenes, who's Black Panther fighting? In his fight scenes, who was he fighting in his fight scenes?
Other Black people, aren't they?
No. So all I'm saying is, I did not see Black power over whites.
Right.
No. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, it wasn't like there was a nation of these South African, rebels who wanted to raid Wakanda in the continent of Africa, right? Because remember, there's that detestable figure Claw. Yes. But Killmonger killed him off camera. We didn't even see him die or suffer anything in nature. He lost his arm at that point in time. But other than that, what's so fascinating is most of the scenes with Black Panther, he's fighting other Black people. Even like the climactic scene. I mean, you throw in this robotic rhino and things of that nature. That's great. But it wasn't like when I turn on Game of Thrones and I see like the orcs versus the elves. It wasn't the Black people vanquishing the whites. I mean, can you imagine psychologically what that would do?
Yeah.
In terms of for our white audience. I mean, maybe for you, it might be interesting because you've never seen that before. It might be anything like, yeah, wow. But that's the movie we didn't see.
No.
And also the other like little details, like I don't know if you saw the outtake, but he goes and addresses the United Nations and says, "We must not be cut off from the world. We will share vibranium with everybody." So that sounds great. Like he's going to share vibranium with everybody. But here's the only detail I have about that. Vibranium, as far as I understood it, was this technological advantage that Wakanda had over the rest of the world. And now you want to give away your technological military advantage for free? Oh, that's interesting. The last thing I'll say is that Bill Gates, I don't know if you heard of him. He's a company,
Microsoft, yeah.
So, and he's I think a billionaire, I believe.
Yeah.
He most famously said that he wanted everyone to have a computer in their home, preferably with Microsoft Windows on it. And I think he's a billionaire because kind of stick to that. At least to you have to pay.
Mhm.
The little detail he didn't mention was, but I want you to pay for the Microsoft Windows
Right.
that I want everyone to have. So in other
Mhm.
words, he had this technology.
Yeah.
I used Microsoft Word this week. I did. So he had this technology, but he was able to be profit from it by selling it. I mean, it still works. It's still a benefit to me.
Mhm.
I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
But he sold it to me. But it's so interesting that now we have a disadvantage, and now we got to give it away. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
And finally, Neil. Okay, if you really you put me there. You got me all amped up.
I got you. I got you.
Neil, let me ask you this though. Can you explain to me what exactly was problematic with Killmonger's stance? Because remember, he wanted to give weapons and technology to oppressed Black people in Oakland. So what makes him a villain? I guess is the question I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Yeah. Arming Black people, that's the problem, right?
No, I'm saying, I mean, because remember, he's a villain,
Yes.
but he's a villain because of why? Is because, he wanted to kill other people? Well, his name is Killmonger, but I
Yeah.
believe like he was upset about how he was treated as a youth, and he
Mhm.
wanted, I guess, some would call it revenge or restorative
Yeah.
justice. I guess you
Mhm.
could call it what you want, but the idea that he wanted to liberate oppressed Black people, that makes him a villain. I thought that was also
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm. Mhm. Excellent points. It's
So,
things
so,
that.
so again, I mean, all I'm saying is
Mhm.
that, you know, for me, it's a fun exercise in terms of how do we engage in critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's not and it's to the extent that we only have one Black Panther, of course, it's just this one target for us to criticize, critique all day, right? Same thing with Obama, like he had to be everything to everybody.
Right.
No, how about he can be Obama? And now it's on you to be the next Obama or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
He did his part, you pick up the baton and let's see how we can carry it forward. So I think in answer to one of your earlier questions, I just think that we just need to see more of it, right? But
Mhm.
we have to acknowledge how the Academy has made changes. Remember, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, African American female, she first took over in 2013.
That's
She was
right.
actually president when hashtag Oscar So White, went down. And
Mhm.
she was very influential and instrumental in helping to increase the size of the membership and diversify. But still, despite the changes, it's funny as an ironic how so little has still changed.
Yeah. But Dr. G, you have dropped some wisdom and I think offered all of us a lot to think about. You've created some framework for us to really begin to look at the movies that are out there more critically and to think about what we're going to watch and how we enjoy it. But I think you've also provided an incentive to all the Black filmmakers and producers and writers who are watching this conversation today, the Denton Black Film Festival celebrates these wonderful creatives experiencing culture and creating culture that I think, if you're listening to this conversation, I hope you all get what Dr. G's saying. It's all love, but I think it's very critical because,
No, I
uh,
mean, and again, I appreciate that, Neil, because the last thing I'll say is that my pops always taught me beware of the coach with nothing to say.
mhm,
Right? It's because I've love for my people that I want to still speak about how we can defend our territory, and be vocal and adamant about us getting what we deserve. And we're human beings on this planet. We only have one life to live. Why can't we enjoy ourselves in the bright lights, of Hollywood? Why can't we save the day, as well? I mean, because as funny or corny as it may sound to some of all of you, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I'm just a kid inside who wants to save the world too.
Dr. G, you have lots to share, and we could continue this conversation, and we may have to. His book, Black Oscars, From Mammy to Minnie: What the Academy Awards Tell Us About African Americans, is available on Amazon. So please pick it up. I'm sure you can learn more about him. Do you have a Twitter feed or anything that we can follow, or anything on social that we can follow up on with
That,
you?
that's actually one of my New Year's resolutions, and I'm
Mhm.
not doing that well, seeing how we're in mid March.
Yeah.
So my social media game is a little lame.
Huh?
However, if anyone has any questions for me,
Yes.
I'll put my email in the chat. They can simply follow up. I'll also put in a textbook, if you would, that I created that can help people be more consistent with their analysis. What are the things to look for? Because everything is formulaic, and I've broken down essentially 6 patterns. Anytime you're going to see a movie, and if you see one of us, chances are very high that we're going to fall within at least one of these 6 patterns. And once you see it, once you have the language, it's hard to unsee. I mean, you've seen it before, Neil. You know it, but it's just having those tools with which to be able to say, you know what, that's exactly what I was processing and thinking. And so, again, party people, I just want you to enjoy the movies for whatever they're worth. But at the same time, understand that movies are not our lives. They don't reflect our lives. They're merely a part of our lives. So keep watching what you're watching, and may you be the star of your own movie.
Thank you, Dr. G. In the name of that book, You Mean, there's Race in My Movie, The Complete Guide to Understanding Race in Mainstream Hollywood. So that's available also on Amazon. Email f.gooding@tcu.edu. And I want to remind our DBFF family about our wonderful concert coming up next week with Mono Neon, a wonderful, extremely brilliant artist, April 16th at the Margot Jones Performance Hall. Please go to DentonBFF.com to get your tickets. And Dr. G, thanks again for spending time with us this afternoon. This has been really a wonderful conversation, and I just admire your great research and your work and your insights, and really challenging this next generation to think creatively about the world around us and ask those questions that help them better understand the world around them. This has been DBFF Soul Talk with Dr. G. Have a good day.